All right. Well, hi, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to listen to me talk about what I do during the day. Normally, we seem to talk more about all the sort of tech audit stuff that we're doing. So it's nice to talk about my day job sometimes, especially because this is so very civic techy. And I've been waiting for a while to bring this to you because I thought it'd be so cool. So here it is. OpenNorth is launching the third round of the Community Solutions Network. And I am here to tell you what it's going to do. So I'm sure most of you have heard of OpenNorth before, but just in case you haven't, this is the little blurb that we like to give people. We drive research, capacity building, and network collaboration with government partners to advance the responsible and effective use of data and technology. OpenNorth in various forms has been around since 2011. It was founded as a nonprofit. The idea was to combine academic research with civic tech work and public service to work on a variety of things, including open government of all kinds and flavors, open data, data governance, procurement. You get the drift. It's that kind of thing. In 2016, they came together, a bunch of academics and the founders, and wrote the Open Smart Cities principles, which I will get to in a little bit. They kind of form the ethical basis for everything that OpenNorth does and for how the Community Solutions Network is structured and structures its approach to digital transformation in municipal sectors and communities and all of that. And then in 2019, they formed the Community Solutions Network. But before I get to that, I just want to say a little bit about the principles because they really do underpin everything we do. And once you've understood them, you'll understand how we see digital transformation. And it's really 5 main principles. This is kind of a shortened, copy-pasted version of a much longer document that is publicly available to anyone who wants to go look at it. It's not the prettiest document because it really was just hacked together on a Google Doc, but the content is pretty interesting. I do recommend that anyone who's interested in digital transformation for the public good, from a sustainable, public interest, inclusive, equity building perspective, go check it out. As a kind of antidote to the Google cities and Amazon cities of the world, it is definitely charting a new approach. So the 5 principles in brief: it understands governance as being ethical, accountable, and transparent. Open smart cities are intended to be participatory, deeply collaborative, and responsive to the needs to every resident in them. And we specifically use the word resident and not citizen throughout all of our work to emphasize that it really does intend to include everyone. An open smart city is clearly data and tech focused, but not data and tech centric. Data and tech are supposed to be fit for purpose, adhere to open standards, where possible, be locally procured and scalable. It's supposed to be used and acquired in such a way that reduce harm, reduce bias, increase sustainability, and enhance flexibility. In an open smart city, data management is, of course, the norm, and custody and control of the data is held and exercised in the public interest. And finally, and this is the one that is dearest and nearest to my heart, in an open smart city, it is recognized that data and technology are not necessarily the solution to many of the systemic issues that cities face, nor are they always quick fixes. So with those principles in mind, we then set forth and published a bunch of stuff over the years. I'm not going to read that all out because it's really not that interesting. But this is all an attempt to take those principles and apply them to the myriad ways that digital transformation can be done in the public sector. So enter the Community Solutions Network. This was born alongside the Smart Cities Challenge in 2019 and was created in partnership with Evergreen Canada and Infrastructure Canada. The idea was for this partnership to offer support and consulting services to all the participants in the Smart Cities Challenge and help them design the most open smart city approach to smart city initiatives possible. the Community Solutions Network was delivered at no cost to the participants, and its focus was on developing and implementing open smart city projects, and providing like advice and consulting for personalized data and technology related support. We shared knowledge and expertise, experience, guidance, etc., with municipal staff and Indigenous communities from coast to coast to coast. Then CSN, as we call it, the Community Solutions Network, ran in iterations 1 and 2. Over that period of time, we supported over 60 communities with their digital transformation projects. Some of the more interesting ones, some of the bigger ones, were the City of Montreal. We helped to develop a data governance framework for the Montreal en Commun project. And then we worked as well with the town of Bridgewater, the City of Calgary, Churchill, Fredericton, Saskatoon, Squamish, Trois-Rivières, and a bunch of others. You can see here the range of different kinds of digital transformation projects that these cities were interested in getting support and advice on. At the same time, we started developing our OpenNorth Training Center, although we only just recently rebranded it as the OpenNorth Training Center. It had some boring technical name before, like LMS or something. But it is a now pretty giant online learning platform with some 40 plus modules on all sorts of different topics for anyone to access for free. They range, as you can see here, from a few of the featured courses on the fundamentals of open smart cities, Indigenous data sovereignty, Data 101, data governance, social procurement, procuring for software, public engagement, you name it. There's a whole range of things there. And it comes in scalable levels of expertise. So there are modules for beginners and experts alike. So enter CSN 3.0, the latest version. We have been developing this over the last few months, and it is due to start up probably end of July, beginning August, somewhere around there, and run until January next year. And the exciting thing about CSN 3.0, and the reason that I wanted to talk about it so much, is that in addition to the sort of one-on-one consulting that we were offering before, we are now adding an entire whole communities of practice program to the offer, still at no cost to the participants. I will get to the details of the communities of practice in a minute, but just as a kind of idea of who might be interested in this, who this is for, we have sort of conceptualized 3 different types of participants. If you are someone who is interested in digital transformation or sort of adjacent to it and just wants to see what other people are getting up to, learn a bit more about it, and then maybe dive into it a bit later, we have the so-called interested observer status, where you can just be along for the ride and see what everyone else is doing. Then the sort of bigger catch-all one in the middle, this is the thing we're sort of ideally going for, are the project accelerator people. If you have an idea, there's a project you've always wanted to get off the ground, maybe thought about a little bit, but are looking for a bit more support and advice on how exactly to develop or implement it, or the specific tools that might be necessary to achieve the kind of goal you're looking for, this is for you. I will get into that in a lot more detail of what that actually entails. But this is what the community of practice is really built around. And then for those who already have a pretty well-developed project, but are looking for more bespoke support on a specific aspect, or a little bit of research on some components that they have not gotten around to or would like some advice on, the project perfecter level is for you. So what exactly is it going to look like? So there will be one-on-one support as before. Anyone who participates can come to us and ask for advice and consultation on whatever project they're working through. And we will provide them with the full range of our expertise and research resources and learning modules, etc., to help solve that problem. Then there will be an online collaboration platform, which is a fancy way of saying Slack, where everyone can get together and talk about the projects that they're in, exchange resources. We will have staff members in there supporting the conversation and answering questions and just animating that space for everyone to collaborate and engage with each other. And then the crown jewel is the Communities of Practice program. This we have divided into 3 broad thematic streams: climate adaptation and mitigation, digital equity, and social accountability. The streams are not prescriptive. You don't have to be in one of them. The project doesn't have to fit neatly. It's merely meant as a way of grouping people together so that they are working on projects that are similar to each other and can support each other better, and also providing a bit of inspiration and support for those who want to initiate a project but haven't really gotten to the point of fully conceptualizing it and are looking for some sort of guidance about which direction to go. Each stream will include a series of workshops and Q&A sessions that are specifically structured to guide them along a process towards a final developed project. So on this sort of thematic areas thing, just a bit more in detail, I mean, the names kind of speak for themselves, but we accept a wide range of project ideas, whatever it is that people have in mind. Across Canada, these are some of the examples we've seen with people who've worked with us before. You'll see everything from creating public Wi-Fi to developing an open procurement policy for a particular piece of technology that they're interested in. Participatory budgeting is a new and interesting one, launching open data portals, you name it. We have lots of examples, and people can follow some of these examples or develop their own as they see fit. This is sort of a rough diagram of the process that a participant in a community of practice will go through. There are a series of workshops and Q&As and learning modules that will help guide people from the sort of initial problem ID and conceptualization phase all the way through to actually taking the first step towards implementation. There'll be all the workshops are deeply collaborative. That's the whole point of a community of practice, is that you get together with your like-minded peers and build relationships and help each other problem solve and work through the issues together. So the first workshop will be one on self-assessment and problem identification to really create a strong basis. Then we'll move on to a planning workshop to develop a viable project plan with all the sort of tools and solutions you might need to achieve the goals. So this could be anything from deciding that you need a data governance framework first before you start thinking about building your open data portal, to anything else that you happen to have in mind for that. Just putting all the right tools in place to achieve a properly open smart city or open smart community project. We'll also be offering a series of Q&As on specific tools and practices. So for example, if someone is interested in using GIS to map, say, heat distribution in their city, but they're not really sure how GIS would do that, we might offer a Q&A session on GIS and get one of our in-house experts to answer questions and explain in detail how this tool might help people's projects. And then the final couple of workshops will be about developing a viable implementation plan and then taking the plunge and actually taking the first implementation step. I didn't have space on the slide to fit the final event, but we had in mind in January to do a kind of final capstone event where all participants can come together and celebrate their successes in implementing their plan. So yeah, that was short and sweet. If this sounds interesting, if you want to know more, if you know someone who might be interested in participating in this, please contact either me or OpenNorth, and we would love to give you all our documentation and tell you a lot more about what we have in mind. And of course, I will be here for the rest of the evening to do Q&A with anyone who has questions.
Awesome, thanks, Tom. So this is the start of the Q&A. So if you have a question, please put a Q or another letter in the chat, and we'll just go in order through the questions. Curtis, great.
Hi, yes, fantastic. Really great presentation. Sounds like a very cool program. Absolutely wonderful. What kinds of entities do you expect? Like when I say entities, I mean, when you say participants, do you expect individuals with personal stake or public servants with project mandate or enterprises or market or not? Typically, do you expect to be interested in this?
It tends to primarily be public servants and municipalities.
Oh, cool.
IT departments, etc., who are most attracted to this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But we're also open to communities who are trying to do something on a sort of, more local level, and Indigenous communities as well. So we're not completely restricted to the municipal thing. It started out that way because it was part of the Smart Cities Challenge, right? But we've broadened from there because digital transformation, it doesn't solely happen on the municipal level. It's projects at all levels, and we want to support communities developing their autonomy and their sovereignty to create digital infrastructure that works for them. For a variety of fairly obvious reasons, we don't get a lot of private companies coming to us, but we're not opposed to the idea, especially if they happen to be working together in partnership with municipalities or a community. That does happen. So yeah, we're not exclusive on any particular kind.
Thank you.
What sort of participants have you had in the last session?
Mainly cities. So we did a variety of different projects with cities from Montreal to Churchill, Manitoba. Like Churchill was actually fascinating. They wanted to set up a system whereby they could share data on how climate change was affecting the permafrost, and then visualize that in a GIS platform. And they wanted advice on how best to go about doing that, which was really interesting. More complicated than you'd think to share that kind of data, more complicated than it should be.
Like in terms of technical or policy or both?
Bit of both. As you can imagine, Churchill is not the most technologically advanced city. So there was that. There's some internal capacity and some technological capacity issues. But also, I forget exactly which government agency held that data, but they were quite unwilling to share it. It took a while to convince them that Churchill was, in fact, a reasonable stakeholder. So I think it worked out in the end.
Cool. Steve.
Yeah, so I have a question here. So I'll start with a bit of a comment. So I've been in the municipal open data space for over a decade, and the issue that I kept bumping into was open data at the local level suffers from the lack of a common data model. So in other words, every city does it their own way. And the value of open data at the city level, I think, is enormous. I think is really powerful if we could only leverage it, it not end at the city borders. So, so what do you think in that regard about developing a common data model for Canada, starting with Canada, let's say?
It should be done now, if not sooner. Unfortunately, I don't really have the power to kind of act of God that into existence. But I agree with you. This open data is only so useful if it isn't actually properly shareable. We do preach open data standards to everyone who participates, but it isn't always that simple.
Cool, thanks.
Gabe, I see you have a question. And before you squeeze that question in, if anyone is like, has questions, but isn't sure about something that you're like, oh, I don't know what the Smart Cities Challenge was. Oh, I don't know what, like, you're also
Oh, yeah,
totally
please
welcome
ask.
to ask questions that are sort of like the groundwork for some of this upper stuff. Feel totally free. And yeah, Gabe, go ahead.
Thanks. I'm really excited about this. I think that the community practice model seems like super powerful, really interesting. I'm really excited about the topics that you're covering, the angle that you're taking, the strong like values basis for this approach. I guess I'm wondering, my question is building a little bit on Curtis's question, where like who are the folks who you anticipate will participate, and in particular, like in the municipal government context, I think there are. I think I'm kind of maybe stretching a little bit here, but I think that there are some common assumptions that are made within governments about like what will be done. The X is important, and therefore we will do Y, and those sorts of decisions are made at a relatively high level, and then public servants are left to implement within guardrails that they didn't set and maybe don't like. And so I wonder, if you're anticipating needing to challenge some of those guardrails that public servants are given, are implicitly or otherwise, and if consequently, like you may need to involve more senior level public servants and even elected officials in some of these programs, and how that might be different when those folks are involved.
Absolutely, you're dead on. Especially with the principles we have, they tend to challenge quite a few guardrails. In our outreach, we make it quite clear that people who are interested, that getting an elected official, ideally with actual decision-making power, to be involved in the project would be immensely beneficial. So they can actually make the kinds of decisions necessary to get a project like this going. So we make that quite clear and hope that somebody will actually heed the call and do it. We're still a fairly small nonprofit. There's not actually that much arm twisting we can do to elected officials, except to show the way and make it as easy as possible and as reasonable as possible. But yeah, it's not an easy one. You are absolutely correct.
In terms of that call as well, not to sit on this, who are the participants for so long, but if you were like asking us to look at our LinkedIns and see who we might like want to forward this on to, how do you conceptualize what a like technology project is? Like, are there people who might work in municipal government that might actually be really interested but not think that they are at first? If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This interesting thing, I mean, despite the fact that we talk so much about digital transformation and smart cities and whatnot, we're actually not particularly, well, we like to say we're not tech-centric, because as I'm sure a lot of you know, the whole idea of the smart city was actually just a PR gag invented by IBM about a decade ago. So technology is just one component. So we would encourage anyone to participate who is interested in a project that is even vaguely affiliated with something like this. Like, do you collect data in the course of your project? Like, data governance is the main thing that OpenNorth tends to consult on. So anyone, and this is pretty much any project at this point, like running a project that involves some sort of data collection and then data analysis to deliver a service, should probably check us out.
Cool. Anyone else have questions about anything? I have more, and I'm happy to keep asking you questions, but I don't really want to hog the mic here. Yeah, Gabe, go ahead.
I mean, I guess just like building on what Sam said, I really liked that question, and would love to share this expansion of the program and availability of programming to to folks who I know who work in municipal government or in community that's related. So and besides this presentation, which we'll share through social media, are there what are other like sort of calls to action or ways that we can help with the promotion of this?
We have a bunch of promotional material that is going through the final design phases. Anyone who has gone through the copy editing, design again, little hell space knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's nearly done. Gabe, when I asked to be on Civic Tech Toronto, I was not expecting you to give me a slot that is quite so early, which is awesome because I get to talk to all of you about this and practice my shtick. But I was kind of hoping the design material would be done by now. But we do have a one-pager sort of promo thing, and then a longer, more involved brochure for people who want a bit more detail that will be ready for anyone who is interested within the next few days. And otherwise, we're pretty gregarious people by nature. So anyone who wants to email me or anyone else on the team and just have a chat about it, we are always open to that as well.
Amazing. Bianca.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about this term community of practice, because I think I've heard it a few times over the years. And I mean, I think I know what it is. I think I've participated in some, but I'm really curious as to why that is the sort of, for the third iteration, like why that's such a focal point. And I'm just curious as to like why, and if you can help us imagine a little more of like how it works, like how a community of practice functions, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I was back and forth a bit on whether I should add another slide and talk more at length about that, but so I will now. With CSN 1 and 2, we did a lot of one-on-one work, which was good and helpful, but projects require more support. There's lots of like nitty-bitty little bits that anywhere from development all the way through to implementation. And also we felt like we were answering a lot of the same questions over and over again, which, while good, was not perhaps the most efficient way. And finally, we also felt that there would be a lot gained from, rather than us providing one-on-one support for everything, to build a more sort of self-sustaining ecosystem of collaboration. And in these workshops, actually work through the different stages of project development with everyone. That would allow us to scale up what we offer, but B, also, it would be a more interactive experience, and I think a richer experience for all the participants to see not just how they might be working through their project, but also help others work through their project, to see all the different components that go into this. Because OpenNorth, even though it does consulting, is not a consulting company. We're not like trying to create more business for ourselves, like the KPMGs and PwCs of the world. In essence, we're trying to make ourselves obsolete. And a community of practice, if it does actually become self-sustaining in that way, would go a long way to doing that, to creating the kind of momentum and space in which people can work through projects with each other and forge the kinds of relationships and collaborative connections that allow them to think through all the different problems. And rather than coming back to us every time they hit a snag somewhere, maybe they can Slack message one of their collaborative friends and work through it like that. The whole essence of the principles of an open smart city or community is supposed to be inclusive and collaborative and participatory. So in a way, this is our attempt to get that going on a kind of community level.
Jumping off of that, I am curious about how, or if you plan on making like certain parts of this process public outside of these like municipal staff that are involved, like publicizing some of the projects that come out of this or some of the workshop outcomes.
Yes, actually, all the tools that we've developed for the workshops are being workshopped in the workshops, so to speak. And we hope to publish the slightly more tested versions of them at the end. Because we published a lot of like toolkits and stuff already that we've used. But there's some really interesting material that's come out of other collaborations that we've had. Like it's a different OpenNorth team has been working with Montreal to help them develop their data governance framework. And in so doing, they've actually developed a really cool tool about how to develop a data governance framework, which I think is ingenious. And we will be testing it now in the workshop, in the community of practice, and then take the tested version public and provide it to anyone who wants it. So yeah, a lot of that will be made public as much as we can. We're not trying to create confidential IP here. That's not how we work.
Cool. Any other questions for Tom? Great. Yeah, Bianca, go ahead.
Yeah, so what I'm curious about, I almost feel like I want to ask Steve, like I can't see if everybody's here. Steve is here on this, because there are these sort of working groups of public servants that are specifically working on things like, I don't know, like there's a whole like geographer, like GIS crew, and I can't remember the acronym, if that's the right, what the alphabet soup of the name of the group is. But it's interesting because there's also these groups like the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. And as far as I imagine, they're, that feels like it should be another place where cities come together and share and stuff, but it feels sort of like policy detached. So I'm curious if you've talked within the organization about like how you connect up with the pre-existing nodes that try to do a little bit of this work. Because in Canada, I feel like it is a huge struggle with us because like we're so dispersed. Yeah. And there's no capacity for it. And this may not be something that you've come across in your work there to date, but I'm just curious because I always feel like we keep not finding ways to like connect what's already there. And I feel like the GIS people are like librarians, like they've been trying to work across for so long and they have their own worlds. So just curious, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you've heard me say this before. Canada suffers uniquely from the double whammy of being geographically really big and having extremely few people in it. So you do get these really dispersed nodes that don't talk to each other very much. But yes, we have in fact connected with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, FCM, yeah, and a few others like it to spread the word. And yeah, it does seem like everyone should be working together a lot more closely than they are, but given how disparate everything is, the whole remote work thing still hasn't quite completely crushed distance as a factor. So it is still disparate, and they're helping us spread the word, but we'll see what comes of that.
If I can just top up there. So a couple things. So you mentioned FCM. FCM is mostly dedicated towards like senior level executives that want to get things done in a very big way. So that's not generally for staff per se. So that's what that group is primarily for. AMO is kind of the same way, a little bit less so. MISA. So there's MISA Canada, MISA Ontario, there's different branches of MISA. That's primarily—
Can you go, because we're all, I think, learning these groups. So can you start at the first one and then,
sure.
Tom, second is okay. This just to me is like part of our whole civil society learning. So just like curious what the groups are.
So FCM, Federation of Canadian Municipalities, AMO, which is the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, MISA, which is the Municipal Information Systems Association. That's a Canada-wide group, although there's strength in Ontario, BC, and a couple of other areas. But strictly like straight up IT sort of groups, right? And then there's URISA. URISA stands for Urban and Regional Information Systems Association. And that is actually like, that's a very big group. They're at least North American, if not larger, but I believe they are North American. And they do have a BC chapter in Canada, as well as an Ontario chapter. Pretty big in Ontario, I would say. That's like your prime sort of GIS people go to meet there. They have an event called Be Spatial, happens once a year. Then they have monthly webinars that have been quite successful. So that's like your GIS folks go there. And then you've got another group that I had the luxury of starting or being a part of, still going strong. It's called the Canadian Smart City Network. That's a new group that started in 2021. And that is, I believe, about 65 municipalities across Canada, from Quebec all the way to BC. Straight up, they meet monthly, and it's just about smart city technology. They do have a vendor session for the first 20 minutes for a vendor to come in, make a presentation. It's book solid. Like, the interest in this is incredible. Like I said, it's a monthly meeting. I mean, the events are book solid throughout the year. So that's going to be a strong and popular group. And OpenNorth is actually a part of that group. So they're a special entity that we called it, and they're an important part of that group. And then in Ontario, there's another group for the open data folks called PSOD, Public Sector Open Data. And strong group of about, I would say, 100 municipalities, of which maybe 60 show up. Meets on a quarterly basis, and that's what Yuri Konga is sort of leading. And also a pretty amazing group, you know, like the people that show up to that group are pretty awesome, actually. Like, they're moving data forward. I got a really good, we did a survey. Of course, I had to remove myself from the group, and that's one thing I'll comment on. But before I do, we did a survey of data across Canada, or across Ontario, I should say, and it wasn't great. Like, where cities stand on data, not a good place. Data governance, zip, almost zip. I mean, we are tragically behind the private sector on that front, like ridiculously behind on data governance. And open data just seems to be scattered. It's on the edge of people's desks, basically, which is really unfortunate. We haven't got to that place where we've optimized open data through APIs yet. And I think once that happens, you'll start to see some real traction in that space. There's a lot of potential for it. But one thing I'll just mention here is that and I've seen this from both sides, right? So I was in municipal government for over 20 years. And then when I moved into the private sector, you know, the one thing I realized is, like, we can't shut the private sector out of that. It's a huge mistake. I mean, all of us have to work together to move Canada forward on this piece. And so I'm happy with how the Canadian Smart City Network was structured, in the sense that we dedicate 20 minutes of a full hour towards any kind of private sector place. But we do not allow them in the remainder of the meeting. That's for municipalities. That's like sacred ground, so to speak. And that's a really good way to do it, I think. So I'll stop there.
Oh, thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve. That was really informative.
Thanks.
And unfortunately, just for the sake of time, I'm going to keep us going. But this is ideally the kind of shared knowledge that will come up in the communities of practice. So thank you so much, Tom, for all this information. If anyone has any more questions, definitely